Hello, today I'm going to be going through how to choose your size in a sewing pattern, also how to decide if you need to do a bust adjustment. I have traced out my starting sewing pattern size and I've copied out all of the markings, the bust point, the waist, the center front, as it says on the sewing pattern. So whenever you're doing alterations on a sewing pattern, always draw in your seam allowance because your alterations will be done up to or on this line. If you are a B cup or roundabout there, we'll be comparing your bust size with the bust size on the envelope and making a sample in that size. If you are outside of the B cup range, you will be tracing off your pattern pieces in the starting size of your high bust measurement that correlates with the bust measurement on the envelope. When you are altering a sewing pattern, the order in which you should alter your pattern would be the length and then the darts and then any circumference measurements. So taking the actual paper pattern, you can hold it up against your body or take measurements with a tape measure, but you're going to check your bust point compared to the sewing pattern, and you can also check your waist position on the front and the back bodice. You will be holding the shoulder seam at your shoulder point and then mark in your own bust point. So that will be basically the fullest point of your bust. You should have a center front marking on your pattern as well, so you can double check that that also is in the right place. I think the bust point is slightly too high and slightly too much to the side. So I'm just going to draw a little cross where I think the bust point should be for this pattern. I'll also double check the waist. So the bust point is really important when you've got darts because all of the darts on the front should be pointing towards the actual bust apex. You can also check if you usually need to add length through a pattern or if you're petite and you need to take length out. You can do so across the chest area and you can also do so across the waist area. When you're doing a bust adjustment, you will need to know the difference between your high bust and your full bust. Most sewing patterns, you get half the pattern, which is either a crossover or you might have to cut it on the fold or you'll have buttons. On the measurements that I've taken from my stand, the difference between the high bust and the full bust is only 1 inch. I'm therefore going to do a small bust adjustment. If you're doing a small bust adjustment, you need to take the difference between your high bust and full bust, in this case 1 inch. You take it away from the B cup, which is 2 inches. So 1 inch taken away from 2 inches leaves you with 1 inch. That means that I need to remove 1 inch from the sewing pattern. If you're doing a full bust adjustment and the difference between your high bust and your full bust is 4 inches, you then need to take away the 2-inch B cup from the difference in your high and full bust. You take away the B cup size, which is 2 inches. That leaves you with 2 inches that you need to add in across the front of your sewing pattern. So the first alteration I'm going to do is for a small bust adjustment. I've marked the bust point that I've taken off of my stand, which would be what you have measured on your own body. I'm then going to find the center point of the existing bust dart. Working from the sewing line, I'm going to draw a line from the middle of the dart to the new bust point. I'm also going to draw a line down towards the waist, which is parallel to the grain line. I'm going to just mark where the actual sewing line is. I'm then going to draw a third line from the bust point, the new bust point, to about a third of the way up the armhole. Again, I'm going to the sewing line. So I've worked out that I need to remove 1 inch across the front of this pattern. I'm working on half of a front, which means I need to remove half an inch on this side. Once you've got your lines drawn in, you're going to cut from the waist up to the new bust point and then to the sewing line of the armhole. I'm going to stop there and then come from the other side into the seam allowance, but I'm going to leave a hinge. So you can see that I can now move that piece freely. I'm also going to cut through the center of the dart and leave a hinge at the new bust point. If you were doing a full bust adjustment, this would be where you would add your fullness. We are doing the opposite now, which means we're taking fullness out. To take the fullness out and do a small bust adjustment, from the line that you've drawn, I'm going to measure half an inch. So that will be half an inch on the left and half an inch on the right, which gives me a full inch that I'm removing. You will need some sellotape here. What you're going to do is overlap and line it up with your half-inch line. You can tape it down. You'll notice 2 things here. One is that the front length has got shorter on the side, and you may also notice that the dart has got narrower. So at this point, you can redraw your dart. Once again, between these 2 original points of the dart, I'm going to find the center. And I'm going to draw that towards the new bust point is over there. I can see it through the overlapped piece of paper, and I'm going to draw the center of my dart to that new bust point. So I'm going to go, let's say 3 centimeters, just over an inch, and that will be my new dart end point. So this is the new bust point. This is the new dart end point. From there, I'm just going to redraw my bust dart. So you can see that the dart has pretty much halved in size. When I've got all of my bust adjustments worked out, I'm going to stick a bit of paper underneath the points where alterations have been made. So I can now fold out for my new dart position, and I'm also going to add into the waist here and see how that looks against my back bodice piece. The reason is because originally when I measured the length of the front against the actual mannequin, you would measure it against your body. There was a new bust point, and the waist on the pattern I'm doing was in the correct place. That means even though the side panel has moved up, I actually want the waist to stay in the same place. That means I might lower this one a little bit, or I might average them. The first thing I'm going to work on is folding out the dart. At this area on the armhole, the seam allowance has opened up over here. Don't worry about that. The main thing to concentrate on is the actual seam line has not changed, because we've gone to that point and that measurement has not changed. That means that that seam will still fit your armhole. To fold out the dart, a bust dart would usually lie downwards. Usually fold my lower section of the dart up until the dart point, open up the pattern, and then fold that over, holding my finger at the dart point. So that's where the shaping comes in. I'm going to redraw the side seam, just averaging the shape over there. You may also want to use your back bodice piece as a reference for shape, and you can get a tracing wheel, press through the line that you've just drawn, and that will give you your new shape. We need to make sure that the side seam is still going to fit onto the back bodice. So leaving the dart folded out, I like to just pin my darts in place so I know that I can measure accurately against the back. When you're measuring adjoining pattern pieces, you have to once again remember that you're working or measuring on the actual sewing line. So this is how I would sew these pieces together. I know I have a notch here, so I'm just going to mark that in. I'm using a pencil for now. So the notch on the side seam has changed, but it still matches the back. This is the shape of the back bodice. And again, I'm going to place these on the actual sewing line, and that will show me the angle at the side seam. This would be the back waistline. That would be the side seam. That's where they join. And I want to make a smooth line that will join up with the front. I don't want to change the waist point as of the original. So I'm going to try and just gently curve this in to meet the pattern over there. So that is the altered pattern for the small bust adjustment, removing 1 inch across the front. I'm then going to cut this out neatly, and that's the pattern that I'm going to use to make my first sample. So that is now your front. You will cut 2 of those pieces, and you have your back, which is cut on the fold, and you can sample that up.